way. So we'll pick topic by topic and look at what are the relevant studies and what is the present consensus and what is supposed to be done, what is the clinical point. So when you talk about goal-directed fluid therapy, the four basic papers have been there. So one was the reverse trial which came way back in 2000, then the three other trials which was process trial, arise trial and the promise trial. So when you talk about the reverse, Emmanuel reverse trial, early goal directed therapy in the treatment of severe sepsis and septic shock. The other, as I said, process, arise and promise. So EGDT trial, it was based on CVP. You target a CVP of either 8 to 12, then you look at the mean arterial pressure, you give vasoactive agents, then you look at SCVO2. Depending on the value of SCVO2, either the blood was transfused or an inotropic agent was given, and if the goal was achieved, the patient was doing fine. The issue was the enrollment was what the fluid challenge was 20 to 30 ml per kg when you were looking at early goal directed therapy. This was as per the reverse trial. If you look at the process trial, they initially started at 20 ml per kg and then they changed to a fixed volume of 1000 ml, and this was done in 31 centers, and they divided their patients into three categories: early goal directed therapy, protocol based standard therapy, and the usual care or the UC group. Then in the arise trial, again they fixed the patients at 1000 ml as the fluid challenge. Similarly in promise trial, 1000 ml as the fixed volume was given. When you look at the outcome data, and this was as per the reverse trial, the Apache was similar, 21.4 and 20.4 in the EGDT and control group. The in-hospital mortality was the main difference, where we started saying that early goal-directed therapy is better and it decreases the mortality. So in-hospital mortality was 30% in the early goal-directed therapy group as compared to 46.5 in the usual or the control group, and this is how the scenario changed. But when these three trials came into the picture, they compared their data and they looked at the in-hospital mortality in all the three groups. So process trial compared it into three groups and there was no change in mortality. Arise trial, again there was no change in mortality, whether it was an early goal directed therapy or a protocol based therapy or the usual care therapy. Similarly promise trial, again in hospital mortality was more or less the same. So the in-hospital cumulative mortality for process, for arise and for promise, they were all statistically non-significant. So there was no role of giving a fixed volume or not following your own clinical practice. And so the clinical pearl after these three trials and that we follow now is that the various approaches which have been examined by all these three trials suggest that alternative strategies like your physician care or your usual protocol of giving fluids is probably equal when it talks about mortality reduction. So there was no strict rule now that you have to follow an early goal directed therapy. The second subset is about colloids. Multiple trials have been there. So it started with the SAFE study where they looked at 4% albumin versus saline, or the BICEP study where they looked at two parts. One was the insulin therapy and the other was the fluid therapy. Then the 6S trial where they compared HES with Ringer's acetate, CHEST trial where again HES with saline, Crystal trial where they looked at colloid versus crystalloid, or the Albios trial where they looked at albumin as a replacement. So when you look at the design of all these trials, they were all multi-center, they were all randomized, they were all blinded, and huge number of patients were taken into all these trials, and the basic eligibility criteria was either septic patients or as a part of fluid resuscitation in ICU patients, and only adult patients 18 to 65 years of age were included in them. The primary outcome in all these studies was death within 28 days, and the secondary outcome was organ failure assessment. So who had organ failures, what was the duration of ventilation, what was the duration of renal replacement therapy, hospital stay, ICU stay. And methodology, SAFE compared 4% albumin versus saline. BICEP, again as I said, it divided into two parts. One was the insulin therapy, so it divided into conventional versus the intensive insulin group, and the fluid part was Ringer's acetate versus the hetastarch. 6S trial was HES versus Ringer acetate. CHEST trial was 0.9% saline versus HES. Crystal study was crystalloid, so they took crystalloid as isotonic or hypertonic saline, and colloid was any hypooncotic like gelatins, 4%, 5% albumin, Hess, dextran, 20% albumin, 25% albumin. So almost all subset was taken as colloids. And Albios was crystalloid versus albumin, and there they administered albumin on the basis of the blood level. So if it was more than 3.5, 2.8 to 3.5, less than 2.8, and so the volume of albumin was different in them. And what was the outcome? This SAFE study, primary outcome, death at 28 days, non-statistically significant. None of the factors, whether you're talking about death in ICU, death in hospital, length of stay in ICU, length of stay in hospital, mechanical ventilation days, renal replacement days, it did not matter whether you gave albumin or whether you gave saline. So there was no difference in probability of survival. When you talk about VICEP group, let us first talk about the insulin part. In insulin part, the death was not different whether the patient had a conventional group versus the intensive group. In the fluid resuscitation part, again, death at 90 days or at 28 days was again not statistically significant whether hetastarch was given or Ringer's acetate was given. But the insulin group had more number of hypoglycemic events, and so this study was terminated before the final analysis was done, because the incidence of hypoglycemia in the intensive insulin therapy group, where you target an blood sugar of 80 to 110, was very high. That was almost 17% versus 4% in the conventional group, and so the insulin part was terminated early in the VICEP study. The secondary outcomes, the organ failure rates, whether it was acute renal failure, renal replacement and red cell transfusion, they were statistically significant. Acute renal failure and red cell transfusion was higher in the group which received hetastarch. So the conventional versus intensive and Ringer's acetate versus Hess, the probability of survival was 0.48 and 0.74, non-statistically significant, as we have seen. Less than 0.5 is what we talk about as statistically significant result. Success trial, primary outcome, here they found that primary outcome was statistically significant. So death or dependency on dialysis at 90 days and death at 90 days was higher in the hetastarch group. And so here is the first time that we found that hetastarch is probably not helping the patients. And this was statistically significant 0.03. The CHEST trial, again, primary outcome, death was not significant, but secondary outcome, renal outcome was statistically significant when we talk about hetastarch. So hetastarch patients had more renal dysfunction, more need for renal replacement therapy. Serum creatinine was higher in the Hess group, and so the urine output was lower in the Hess group, and they were both statistically significant. Probability of survival was same, 0.26. So probability of survival was not significant, but the other organ failures were significant. Crystal study, where they compared crystalloid versus colloid, again death at 90 days was significant, rest all was not significant. So at 90 days, colloid group had a higher mortality as compared to the crystalloid group. Albios trial, as I said, it depended on the content of albumin, on the level of the blood serum albumin level, and so the primary outcome, secondary outcome, they were all same. When you do a subgroup analysis of the Albios trial and at randomization, when they looked at patients who presented with septic shock at randomization, and if they were put into the albumin group, they had a 5.9% reduction in mortality only in patients who were having septic shock at randomization, and that was statistically significant. But when you look at the entire population of patients, they were not statistically significant. So even albumin administration was not helping these patients. Only in the subset of septic shock it did help, and so there was no statistical significant. 0.39 is the number. So if you look at all these studies and what is the present consensus about colloids, they do not decrease mortality, rather studies have shown that they increase mortality. there is more need for organ failure support system, so there would be more renal replacement therapy, more need for blood transfusions, and no hemodynamic advantage. And so the present thought is that they should not be used for fluid resuscitation in critically ill patient. Then blood products. There are two trials about the trigger, then there are two trials about the age of blood. So when you talk about the trigger, or what should be the level at which you want to transfuse your patient, so one is the TRIG trial, which came in 1999. This was a multi-center randomized trial, and the other is the TRIS trial, where again they looked at the levels, and they both are open label multi-center trials. Almost 7,500 patients are there, and they divided their patients into two groups. One was the liberal group, where the blood transfusion was given when the HB went down below 9, and the other was the conservative group, right, or the miser group, where they gave blood when your levels were below 7. And what was the outcome data? The outcome data was death was fine, there was no difference in liberal and restrictive. Only in hospitals it was statistically significant that the liberal group had more deaths in hospital as compared to the conservative group, but overall the data was not significant, and when you look at the overall survival, it was not significant, 0.10. When you look at the TRIS trial, again the same finding. The primary outcome, which was death at 90 days, and secondary outcome, which are other organ failure days, vasopressors, ventilation, renal replacement, they were all non-significant. So again, why to give more blood when the same results are there with the less amount of blood transfusion? So they were again of the same findings. Then the other two trials about the age of the blood. This was about the trigger of the blood. Then what is the importance of age of the blood? So one was the ABLE trial, and which said they received blood transfusion with red cells stored less than 8 days, or as per the protocol of the blood bank, which is generally the protocol of all blood banks, that they would issue the oldest blood that is there with them. So does it make any difference that you want a fresh blood or you want the oldest stored blood? And if you look at the outcome, the forest plot, right, it did not show any better for fresh blood. Everything went in favor of the standard protocol that give the oldest blood which is there, whether you are talking about the death in ICU hospital or 28-day, or you are talking about organ failures, the various cardiovascular, respiratory, DVT, nosocomial infection and transfusion reactions. They were all more or less similar and all favored the standard protocol of the blood bank, and there was no survival benefit by giving a fresh blood. As I said, the other trial was the transfuse trial. Here again they looked at the short-term storage, so the freshest blood was given, and the long-term, the oldest blood was given, and again same findings. There was no difference in any of the outcome, whether this was death or organ failure. So all favored that the protocol of giving the oldest blood is also good enough in critically ill patients. Then what should be the ratio in which they should be transfused when you are talking about a massive blood transfusion in trauma subset? So they looked at 1:1:1 versus 1:1:2, and that means in the ratio of plasma, platelet and PRBC, and this is called the proper trial. This was a multi-site randomized trial, and the findings were mortality same, whether you are transferring as 1 plasma, 1 platelet and 2 PRBC, or 1 plasma, 1 platelet and 1 PRBC. There is no difference in mortality. The only difference was there in achieving hemostasis. 1:1:1 achieved hemostasis better and earlier as compared to 1:1:2, and that too within the first 24 hours. And so the conclusion was that early administration of plasma, platelets and RBC in 1:1 ratio compared with 1:1:2 did not result in significant difference in mortality at 24 hours or at 30 days. However, more patients in 1:1:1 group achieved hemostasis and fewer experienced death due to exsanguination by 24 hours. So the clinical pearl about blood transfusion would be restrictive strategies better, because liberal strategy is not helping your patients, as in they are not showing any mortality benefit. So why to transfuse so much of blood? Target of 9 grams should only be reserved for cardiac patients. If they are having an active ischemia, they should be given transfusion. No adverse effect of age of RBC transfusion. So the protocol of the blood bank that giving the oldest blood, please don't fight with them. They are right enough. The trials don't support us, right? And the ratio of 1:1:1 or 1:1:2 doesn't make a difference. So even if you are giving at 1:1:2, you are good enough in controlling the mortality in these patients. Then about insulin. Vandenberg did 2 trials, right? And one was in the medical patient, one was in the critically ill patient, and these are single center trials. And then the NICE sugar trial came into the picture. So the Vandenberg trials were single center trials, and the NICE sugar was a bigger trial. Almost 6,000 patients were enrolled. In all the 3 trials, the patients were divided into 2 categories. Intensive insulin therapy group. So again, the sugars were tightly controlled between 80 to 110, and the conventional group where insulin was started when the blood sugar levels exceeded 215, but the target was to keep it around 180. And what was the result? When they looked at critically ill surgical patients, these are Vandenberg trials, right? These trials supported intensive insulin therapy, remember that. So they said that in the intensive group, the death in ICU was less, and whenever the patient had an ICU stay of more than 5 days, then also intensive insulin therapy did better. In hospital death in all patients, intensive insulin therapy did better. Now this is in surgical patients, and so it was statistically significant as per Vandenberg. When it looked at the medical patients, again, entire data, no significance. When you look at the subgroup of patients who stayed for more than 3 days in medical ICU, they were found to be better with intensive insulin group. Again, a single center trial, and so way back it was followed, it was a practice to continue with intensive insulin therapy group. So this is when you look at the entire subset, and this is when you are looking for patients who stayed for more than 3 days in ICU. But then the NICE sugar trial came in, which was a bigger trial, a multi-center trial. Many countries participated in it, and they found that at 90 days, at 28 days, the intensive insulin therapy group had a higher mortality as compared to the conventional group, and this higher mortality was attributed to significantly higher number of hypoglycemic events in intensive insulin therapy, where you're tightly controlling between 80 to 110, and there was a mortality difference, and it was statistically significant 0.03. So now when you talk about insulin therapy based on these trials, the Surviving Sepsis campaign adopted the results of NICE sugar trial, and they found that the levels of 180 are good enough. NICE sugar based trials, less hypoglycemic events, and Vandenberg trials are now not a standard of care. We do not do those trials. So the target blood sugar should be less than 180, but don't start at 180. You can start at a little higher value. The range should be around that. About steroids in critical care. So there are many trials about steroids, but the more important ones, one was the CRASH trial, and this was in clinically significant head injury, a big trial, 10,000 patients were there, and here they divided into 2 groups. One was the methylprednisolone group, and the other was the placebo group. In the methylprednisolone group, they gave a dose of 2 grams and followed by an infusion of 0.4 gram, and what they looked was death within 2 weeks of therapy was the primary outcome. And when they found out in all the parameters, whether they looked at the injury severity based on your GCS or the time since injury, everything said that if you are giving corticosteroids, you are increasing the mortality. Corticosteroids were worse when you are talking about this. Second came Corticus trial, Charles Sprung, right? And he said that give steroids to all septic shock patients, and probably if you are looking at mortality. So he divided patients based on your ACTH response, and he divided them into 2 categories: response to corticotropin and no response to corticotropin. So when he looked at no response to corticotropin, death within 28 days, same. Response to corticotropin, same. Overall, same. And so there was no response in terms of mortality. But then he looked at what is about shock reversal. So when he looked at the shock reversal phenomena, no response to corticotropin or response to corticotropin or all patients, they were all statistically significant, which means if you are administering steroids to septic shock patients, the shock reversal is faster in patients receiving steroids, but there is no mortality benefit of reversing the shock early. Remember that. There is no mortality benefit of reversing the shock early in these patients. Then the adrenal trial where they gave adjunctive glucocorticoid in patients with septic shock, and outcome was same. Primary outcome 90 days, no difference. Secondary outcome 28 days, no difference. Again, only median time to resolution of shock was better in the corticosteroid group as compared to the other group. The survival was not significant. Only thing which was significant was shock reversal. The same finding as Corticus trial. And as I said, non-significant differences were whether there was 28-day mortality or discharge from the hospital or other organ support discharges. Then the other trial which came into the picture was corticosteroids in CAP, community acquired pneumonia, right? 2015 JAMA trial. So what they looked was what is the rate of treatment failure if you are administering steroids, and they divided into two groups. One received methylprednisolone and the other received placebo, and they found what that the treatment failure incidence was lower in the methylprednisolone group as compared to the placebo group. But if you look at the length of stay in hospital ICU was same, mortality no difference, only and only treatment failure was the phenomena which was being helped by steroids, and there was no difference in other findings. One more important trial again about shock was the Hypres trial, again published in JAMA. They divided patients into hydrocortisone group on a certain dose range and then the placebo group. Similar finding, septic shock, placebo versus this, no difference. Secondary was mortality at 28, 90, 180 ICU hospital, not at all different between the steroids and the non-steroid group, and there was no difference in the probability of septic shock. So if I have to look at all the studies of steroids in critical care, and now the dictum is in traumatic brain injury it increases mortality. So steroids in traumatic brain injury, please do not administer. Steroids only causes early reversal of shock in sepsis, but again it does not decrease mortality. Two trials have confirmed it, right? You don't need more trials to say the same thing. When you're talking about severe community acquired pneumonia, methylprednisolone only decreases the treatment failure incidence. It does not decrease mortality. So please, when you're giving methylprednisolone, don't think that it will decrease the mortality. Patient with severe sepsis not in shock, remember it. Steroid did not reduce the mortality or incidence of shock, which means patients are presenting with sepsis but they are not in shock, and you are administering steroid. That does not mean the shock will not happen in them. Understand it, right? So steroid do not prevent that. Then vasopressors. What is the role of vasopressors and what is the recommendation? So few important trials, the VAST trial where they looked at vasopressin and norepinephrine, the SOAP2 trial where they looked at dopamine and norepinephrine, then the VANISH trial where they looked at vasopressin and norepinephrine. All three trials, they compared one vasopressor with the other, and they looked at the effect on acute kidney injury, and they were all randomized trials. Total patients were around 2,800. When you look at the VAST trial, the mortality was not changed, the length of stay was not changed. But if you administer vasopressin in a less severe shock state, those patients, it had a mortality benefit. But if you are administering vasopressin as a second vasopressor when the septic shock, when the dose of norepinephrine was on a higher side, these patients did not have any mortality benefit. But in a lesser shock state, vasopressin had a mortality benefit. SOAP2 trial, dopamine and norepinephrine, no mortality benefit. But again, when you look at the subgroup of SOAP2 trials, patients who presented with cardiogenic shock had more cardiac arrhythmias when dopamine was administered as compared to norepinephrine. So it is a cardiogenic, it's an arrhythmogenic drug. So SOAP2 trial, again, if you look at the subgroup analysis, this was the finding. But if you look at broad category, there was no difference whether you give dopamine or norepinephrine, and that is the reason surviving sepsis. Sometimes in earlier this was there, now they have totally removed, and norepinephrine and adrenaline stands there. VANISH trial where they looked at vasopressin and norepinephrine, but they also combined hydrocortisone in both the groups, and what they found was it was not statistically significant whatever drug you give, whether this was serum creatinine, urine output, nothing was statistically significant. About blood pressure targets, this was one study about sepsis-PAM where they targeted the blood pressure, that if you keep a higher blood pressure, keep a mean of 85 or keep a mean of 65, does it make any difference in these patients? And they found that there was no difference at death or any other organ failure as compared to any of the blood pressure targets. So 65 mmHg as MAP is good enough, and there is no point in adding a noradrenaline or a vasopressor to target it to 85. And they found that 28-day and 90-day mortality did not differ significantly between those who were treated to reach a MAP of 80. Methylene blue. Now, how many of you use methylene blue as a vasopressor? Oh, hardly one or two. Now, this is an interesting vasopressor, right? And there have been a lot of literature about it now. Now this was published by Eldawi, and this was a single blind randomized trial where they looked at methylene blue in a dose of 1 milligram per kg followed 2 hours later by an infusion and versus vasopressin. Methylene blue is easily available for an intravenous form. 1 ampule is for 10 ml. It constitutes 100 milligram. So it can be given as a vasopressor. It's an excellent drug as a vasoconstrictor when you are looking at vasoplegia. And what they found was that the mean arterial pressure was better with methylene blue. The cardiac output was better with methylene blue. The need for vasopressors had gone down with the use of methylene blue. And so to combine all the studies of vasopressors, vasopressin or dopamine versus noradrenaline, this two versus noradrenaline, there is no difference in mortality or AKI. Cardiac arrhythmias, as per the SOAP2 trial, it increases with dopamine administration, specifically when you are looking at cardiogenic shock patients. Vasopressin decreased mortality in patients with less severe septic shock. This is the VAST2 trial subgroup. Raising the BP target in septic shock does not decrease mortality as per the sepsis-PAM, and methylene blue is a good alternative option for stabilizing hemodynamics in vasoplegic septic shock patients. Then about the renal category. Now there are trials based on the dose of renal replacement therapy and timing of renal replacement therapy, right? So when you talk about the dose of renal replacement therapy, the two standout articles are the ATN trial and the renal trial. They both looked at what should be the intensity of the renal support in critically ill patients. They were both compared to look at intensity on mortality and renal recovery. That is mostly the determinant in all the trials which are based upon renal system, that they are looking at what is the renal recovery. They were randomized trial, 2600 patients were there, and in the ATN trial, the patients were divided into intensive therapy where the intermittent dialysis or the SLED was done 6 times a week as compared to CVV-HTF of 35 ml per kg per hour, or the less intensive group was 3 times a week and CVV-HTF of 20 ml per kg per hour. Similarly, in the renal trial, CVV-HTF was either 40 ml or 25 ml between the high and the low intensity. And what was the outcome? When you look at the ATN trial, death in hospital from any cause, discharge to home, renal recovery, they were all similar between the less intensive group and the higher intensive group, and there was no difference in probability of death. They were all same, so it was not significant. Similarly, the renal trial also showed the same data, that death at 90-day and 28-day, or the RRT dependence at 90-day and 28-day between the high intensity group and the low intensity group was same, and it did not matter whether you give at 40 ml or at 25 ml per kg. Then about the timing, that was about the dose. Then when do you start the renal replacement therapy? And so there were 2 trials, the Akiki trial and the Elan trial. Again, 2 standout trials for this. And they looked at the initiation strategies and early versus delayed initiation of renal replacement therapy. And they divided their patients into early and late. Early was at the randomization or at 8 hours of KDIGO, and delayed was whenever the actual indication, which was anuria or oliguria, started, or in Elan trial it was at stage 3, or either the patients were not offered any replacement therapy. And what did the Akiki said? The Akiki said it is same whether you are talking about death or you are talking about dependence on renal replacement therapy, it doesn't matter whether you start at randomization or you start at the end, it doesn't matter. But, and this was not statistically significant, but when you talk about Elan trial, it said that the early renal replacement therapy had a mortality benefit rather than waiting for too long or not offering any renal replacement therapy for severe patients, and this was statistically significant. Then this split trial about the type of fluid, does it affect the renal system? So this was about the crystalloid, a buffered crystalloid versus saline on acute kidney injury, the split trial. And here they found was, again, there is no difference whether you are giving a buffered crystalloid or saline on AKI or mortality in any of these subgroup. So the intensity of RRT does not affect mortality or renal recovery. So don't just do it at 40 ml per kg per hour. Generally 25 to 30 ml is the sufficient dose. But remember, this 25 to 30 ml is the delivery dose. It is not the prescribed dose. Please calculate the stoppages, please calculate the shiftings, please calculate the recirculation, please calculate how many times the filter is getting blocked. So calculate all this. So 25 to 30 ml is the delivered dose, and generally what you do is you set a 5 ml per kg above it to counteract all these measures. Timing of renal replacement therapy is again still a question because two trials have shown two different results, but earlier the better. Saline versus balanced solution does not affect the incidence of AKI. Acetaminophen, the heat trial, which said can it prevent and does it have a mortality difference? Again, it doesn't affect the outcome whether you're talking about the death or you're talking about the hospital free death. So paracetamol again doesn't change anything, and it should not be used as a routine for all patients to look at the mortality. You can look at almost all articles here at the bottomline.org.uk. They have categorized it beautifully as per the system, as per the year. So you can look at it. It's a beautiful site, free site, right? Thank you.